You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is January 21st, 2026, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region, and issues in the news from a liberty perspective. On with me this time on the show, we have our invisible hand, James Just. He is responsible a lot of times for the things you don't see that happen behind the scenes on this show. My name is Jason McPhee, and I will be your host. So no Leon this week. He's in New York, so I guess he's just checking out, getting his fill of Mamdani out there, I guess.
So, yeah. Road testing some, what is it? Leon's road testing socialism. That's what.
There you go. Yeah. Well, some of the topics we're going to get into on the show today, we are going to, just when we thought we had gotten out of Minnesota from the last show, they keep pulling us back in. So we're going to be talking about that church takeover that happened recently in the protesting, and some of the trouble that Don Lemon has gotten himself into there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Trump's recent push to put price caps on credit cards, some of the changes going on at the EPA with respect to the way they calculate benefits on regs. And finally, we're going to hear a discussion between Kara Swisher and Ro Khanna on their high level of frustration at what the wealth tax is doing in chasing billionaires out of the state. But before we get into any of that, we always start with our quote of the day. And before we get into that this time, I did want to remind people too, if you happen to be local and watching on public access, the Constitution discussion group tomorrow will be having a discussion. Well, tomorrow, this January 22nd. So if you're watching this on public access, it may be too late, but at least the show the discussion they're going to have tomorrow is on the genealogy of liberty, but they've got some other liberty related discussions they're going to have in the upcoming weeks. So something, maybe you might be interested in if you're local. But now to get into our quote of the day. So we always kick off with a liberty quote, and this time it is going to be by Thomas Sowell. So, and he says, this is sort of an economic thing that observation that he had early on, and to some of the stuff we're going to talk about later. But he says, costs don't go away just because you refuse to pay them, any more than gravity goes away if you refuse to acknowledge it. You usually pay more in different ways through taxes as well as prices, and by deterioration in quality when political processes replace economic processes. And, it just can't, I say enough how much this happens all the time. And we're seeing in New York, when they always try these rent control schemes and all these other things, they try and say, hey, I don't like that that rent is expensive. What can the government do for me? Oh, the government can just artificially lower the price. And then we see that a lot of times that doesn't work out quite the way people think it's going to work out. And there's all kinds of unintended consequences. And a lot of times, as Thomas Sowell notes, the outcome is worse than than what they started with. And, this will probably tie in a little bit to this story on credit card caps that we're going to talk about later. But what do you think about this quote, James?
Well, in the last couple of years, right, we've noticed one thing. They understand this when it comes to Trump's tariffs, but somehow they don't understand it when it comes to every other tax, right? When it comes to Trump's tariffs, it's just a tax on the American people. 100% correct. But somehow the tax on the business or the cost of regulation on the American consumer, when they're the ones imposing it. So they do understand the concept. They just don't actually care. So I just want to, they only care when it's the other guy, right? That's the problem. And it's one side or the other. It's both sides, right? They only care about the costs when it's their costs.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, I notice, like, conservatives are conspicuously quiet when we're talking about like Trump's plan to cap credit card rates, but But they can all see it really clearly when it's Mamdani doing it in New York on rent control. So,
Yeah, it's the same
oh,
thing, right? It's actually not. It's not as different as people like to pretend it is. I get the instinct, right, for things like credit card control. I get the instinct for rent control. It's just it never actually works because it rules out human behavior, as we'll discuss later. You're essentially ignoring human behavior.
I will say something though on the both sides thing. I noticed that a lot of times this is the one area when Trump says he wants to do something like this, Democrats actually kind of say, "Hey, this one time Trump got it right." It's a really rare thing, but they all seem to always love it when you start talking price controls.
Well, yeah, he'll steal their issue, right? Is what this whole credit card thing? It was a Democrat issue, so he stole it.
Yeah.
Yeah, is essentially what happened. So yeah, it is what it
Populist
is.
economics, and every time it's like gravity, like Thomas Sowell said. But I realized before when I mentioned that that Constitution discussion group, I forgot to put the flyer up when I was looking at it on my other screen over here. But that location is on Auburn Boulevard at Epic Bible College, so it's something that it happens every other Thursday. So just something that if it happens to interest you. Okay, well, anyways, let's get to our first topic, and that is the the chaos still going on in Minnesota. And so it's just absolutely nuts. It seems like every week this stuff gets worse. I mean, we had a whole show on the chaos around the Nicole Good shooting, and this was the ICE agent who wound up shooting her when they had their altercation. And we went all through that, and we don't want to relitigate that whole thing, but just show you, I mean, we just got out of that topic, and now suddenly we're in a situation where a church has been taken over. So we've got a whole bunch of controversy there. So I've got a video to kind of bring everybody up to speed on that. So let's get into our video here.
One of the most shocking moments from the weekend coming yesterday when protesters entered a church where an ICE agent allegedly serves as a pastor and disrupted the service.
Well, that's nuts. These mostly peaceful protesters, as CNN might call them, essentially trespassing onto private property of a church in order to make their protest, which is not peaceful. If you are on somebody else's property, that's literally not peaceful. If you are running your protest, you don't have any right to be doing that. Let's get a few more details from the reporter.
Hi, Natasha. We're actually in St. Paul outside of the church where that protest happened yesterday. St. Paul police telling me that about 30 to 40 protesters interrupted the church service Sunday morning, and that they did receive multiple 911 calls when this happened. People confused about exactly what was going on. Now,
and of course, the police eventually showed up, but they did nothing to stop this trespassing, this non-peaceful protesting of these people trampling all over the rights of these churchgoers. Let's hear a little bit from the police chief about what they saw as far as any crimes happening.
I see nothing.
Well, that seems pretty consistent with everything we've seen about Minnesota police enforcing crimes against the left. Let's hear a few more details about the story.
Attorney General Pam Bondi says she spoke with the pastor of that church, saying that she's prepared to use the full force of federal law on attacks against law enforcement and the intimidation of Christians. The congregation's lead pastor said interruptions were shameful and asked anyone who wasn't worshiping to leave. He's posting on X that agitators are going from hotel to hotel, church to church, hunting for federal law enforcement who are risking their lives to protect officers. Meanwhile, I did speak with one of the event. Take a listen.
Do you guys feel like perhaps maybe you went too far? I know that there was one guy
Absolutely not. Listen. I'm not going to go down this line of questioning with you. This is gaslighting. Who has gone too far is Donald Trump.
And that leads to what's the next step for the federal government?
The Department of Justice is now saying it is investigating that group for potentially violating the churchgoers' rights to exercise their freedom of religion. And now the Department of War saying it is readying 1,500 active duty troops to deploy to the area if President Trump decides to invoke the Insurrection Act, something the city's mayor is speaking out against.
Well, what do you think, James? I mean, a lot of stuff going on there, but also too, right at the end, the Department of War is doing things on American soil. I mean, this story has everything.
Well, the Department of Soil has happened before. It's none of this stuff is actually new. The reason these things are actually against the law, whether it's a church service or an abortion clinic, oddly enough, is those things are federally protected. Abortion clinics and church services are federally protected against this exact type of intimidation. And so if someone so chooses to, it is against the law on a couple of things, right? It's the FACE Act, and it's also the Ku Klux Klan Act, oddly enough, is the other act that is going to be, could be used, right? Because you have people sitting here intimidating people from going about their business, which is exactly what the Ku Klux Klan Act. Because remember, back in the 1870s, 1860s, 1870s, people were going around burning churches and, preventing people from, practicing their faith. And so is Don Lemon in trouble? Maybe. It depends really how far the Justice Department wants to push this kind of thing. Yeah, it's really dependent on that.
And just to let people know, I mean, there were stories where, one of the controversies is, was this peaceful, right? And, if you hear somebody from the left talk about it, they say, well, of course it was peaceful. There wasn't a fight in there. They just, came in there and gave their 2 cents. But, I think the point they seem to miss a lot of times is this is private property. I mean, the government's First Amendment right to speak, that has to do with, you being free to speak on your property or on government property, the commons, not on somebody else's property. So, I mean, you don't have the right to go onto somebody else's stage and, recite your poetry. Right? I mean, that wouldn't be peaceful. So,
well, and here's the thing. These laws, it specifically is against intimidation, right? So it is acts. You cannot tell me that the whole point of that was not to intimidate people. It was intimidate people to either shut up or go away. That was the whole point. And so the fact that it was intimidation makes it not peaceful by its very nature. If your goal is to intimidate people, you are not a peaceful person. Maybe you find yourself morally right. That's a different argument than what's legally correct. And so, yeah, you are not a peaceful protest if your goal is to intimidate people. You cannot then argue that you're peaceful.
And this is one of the things that's been pointed out too, as well, that is certainly in, as some of the news articles have come out, and even in Don Lemon's own reporting that we're going to see in just a little bit here, it cited that, hey, you can see frightened children around this church because they have no idea what's going on. I mean, it's just a normal Sunday service, and suddenly a mob of people come in and take over and start kind of screaming at the people, pointing at them and addressing them by their race, and just all kinds of, kind of crazy things. But so and one of the things that, as you've already alluded to, this brings up the question of, I guess, Don Lemon as a journalist. I mean, he, obviously he's sort of a disgraced journalist, I guess you might say. I mean, he used to be a CNN anchor and he's fallen hard. CNN kind of gave him the boot. He got a chance from Elon Musk on X, and then he tried to sandbag Elon Musk on his own platform. And so he, of all things, on an argument about what is, and then, he's completely on his own, and he is now embedding himself with protesters. And the question is that legal? Can you do that as a journalist? And so I think the question, let's see, so there are a few articles that we have where the DOJ says it's looking to press charges against him. And we're going to kind of see, did he violate the FACE Act that you're talking about, or the Ku Klux Klan, or both?
Actually, I listened to a couple lawyers last night about this, and it looks like he technically violated both. Now, whether they choose to go after him for both, but they could. It's clear. It's not even a question of did he. It's do they feel like going after him for it? Because his own reporting, as you'll show, his own reporting was a clear violation. He literally sit there and said, "This is what we're going to go do." Which, when you compare it to the test, he's in clear violation of the law. And again, being a journalist, it's not a get out of jail free card from participating in violent acts.
Yeah, it's one thing
standing there watching and reporting. Okay, fine. If you happen to be around an incident and an incident happens and you follow them in, that's one thing. But he embedded himself in before. It's not like he was just there and then was reporting. He was part of the whole deal. He was part of the conspiracy. So
and even if he had followed them in, there's still a question as far as it being private property. I mean, this wasn't like a government building or anything else. This is private property. And if the people tell you to leave, even if you're a journalist, that doesn't mean you have the right to stay.
Yeah.
The owner tells you to leave.
I have a little bit more sympathy if he was a journalist. He heard about this protest. He came here. The protest was already ongoing, and then he followed in. I'd have more sympathy. I wouldn't want him charged. But he had embedded himself. He was part of the conspiracy. So he's going to get what he gets one way or the other. So
so we have some of his video that we're going to show. It's mostly his reporting that we're going to show here, along with an extra clip of Dilly Harmon talking about this afterwards, briefly on another podcast. But this is going to show essentially Don Lamont's his eye on the whole thing, kind of him explaining what he knows going through it. And keep in mind, I mean, the things that you have to show is that did he know what was going to happen? Was he part of the conspiracy? Did he have intent? Did he refuse to leave? When he was told. I mean, these are all parts of the and was the intent to disrupt these people, right, in their exercise of their religion? These are all issues, and so I think let's watch the video, and we'll let you decide. This has been kind of snippeted up so that we can, again, it's going to be a little over 3 minutes here, so bear with us. But I mean, I think you have to see this to see all the elements. Okay, so here we go.
But these are resistance protesters. They're planning an operation that we're going to follow them on. I can't tell you exactly what they're doing, but it's called Operation Pull Up. And it's Sakima Armstrong, and she has been doing this since George Floyd, Dante Wright, and others, where they surprise people, catch them off guard.
We see Don Lemon already knew who the people were who committed this crime. He was them. Let's watch a little more and see how much farther this goes.
And this is an operation that is a secret, that they invited folks out. Can't tell you what is going to happen, but you're going to watch it live unfold here on the Don Lemon Show. There are for this reason, it may look like MAGA coded, but there's a reason they have so many white people here. I'm just going to be honest. It's because of the operation that they're doing today. It's important to have allies, as they said, white allies here. So that is what I could say. I turned our camera off of them because they're giving some critical information here. But there we go.
He clearly is indicating that he is aware of their operational tactics, even to the point where he talks about having allies in the group.
So we are here now. Do you think if you just have it, I think just have it on the church, but if they see me, they're going to know.
Here he even has indicated that he knows the location of it before it happens, and that he doesn't want to give it away by letting people see him before the event.
I think they found out according to them, this is according to Operation Pull Up, that one of the pastors here is a member of ICE. And so here we go.
Because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world, is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me, though.
We're here to worship Jesus. Yes. That's why we're here. Yeah. Okay. That's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a
No
Christian?
one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to chronicle what happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
We're here to worship. Yeah. We're here to worship. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And here, Don Lemon has filmed himself being told to leave the church, and he is not leaving.
People here I'm looking at a young man who's in the corner. He's frightened. He's scared. He's crying. People are leaving church.
And here Don Lemon is admitting in his own words that he knows his co-conspirators are terrorizing the people there in the church.
I had no affiliation to that organization. I didn't even know they were going to this church until we followed them there. We were there chronicling protests. Once the protest started in the church, we did an act of journalism.
And finally, here we've seen Harmeet Dillon, the Assistant Attorney General of the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, looking on to Don Lemon's video of him trying to claim he wasn't affiliated with the group in order to provide himself cover, even though his own journalism has deeply exposed him. This is kind of who fake news journalist Don Lemon is.
Journalism is not a badge or a shield that protects you from criminal consequences when you are part of a crime. And I think the videos show how close he was to these folks. I think further evidence will show more information about that. But he clearly knew, and he stated before going into the facility, it's on his own video, what was going to happen there. What was going to happen was a violation of federal law, federal criminal law. To say, I mean, the FACE Act has been out there for more than 30 years, and there were lawyers involved in this so-called protest, and their purpose was to terrorize people of faith in a house of worship.
And of course, this is the FACE Act that we were just showing earlier as James was talking about it. And one of the tenets here is intentionally injuring, intimidating, or interfering with, or attempting to injure, intimidate, or interfere with any person by force, threat of force, or physical obstruction, exercising or seeking to exercise the First Amendment right of religious freedom at a place of religious worship. So that is literally the second clause of the.
And I don't want to engage in hyperbole. So this is an act of intimidation, which is against the law. I'm not going to go into terrorize because I don't want to equate this kind of thing to a terrorist. It was clearly an attempt to intimidate, and that makes it against the law.
Yeah. And on race, and I also wanted to say too that there's this other really short clip I have of Don Lemon getting himself into trouble even further, because after this all happened, he went on somebody else's podcast and he said it was about intimidation. So I mean, I just, you can't imagine. I mean, he's going to be the guy testifying against himself.
Yeah, of course. The problem is if he gets Minnesota residents to be on the jury, he may very well be guilty, but get off him, because as less libertarians know, jury nullification is a thing.
Yeah. So. Wait, here's the quick clip of him on somebody else's podcast. I think it's some co-podcast where he's doing it for both his podcast and somebody else's. But
there's a certain degree of entitlement. I think people who are, in the religious groups like that, it's not the type of Christianity that I practice, but I think that they're entitled, and that entitlement comes from a supremacy, a white supremacy. And they think that this country was built for we left England because we wanted religious freedom. It's religious freedom, but only if you're a Christian and only if you're a white male, pretty much. And so, yeah, I absolutely 100%, but it's an intimidation tactic.
So when we said it was an intimidation tactic, he was talking about what they were doing. Would have been a much longer thing, but I'm sure they'll play it all in context in court.
Yeah, and Don Lemon's interpretation of why people are the way they are, up to itself, that's the most simplistic interpretation of history that I have ever heard, and I've heard some pretty simplistic interpretations of history.
Well, and it's just, I mean, everything, with him and some of these people who are the social justice warriors, they come out and, everything turns back on race. And I mean, it's just absolutely nuts. I mean, here you just have people who are worshiping, and now you're going to make this about race.
Well, everything's about power, right? It's group power, and everything about the left is about group power. But the reality is they don't care about group power. It's a marketing gimmick for their communism, right? It is what it is. And we should stop pretending that it's anything but. This is just marketing for their communism.
Yeah. And in case, you're not sure that there was sort of racial intimidation going on there, I had this really short clip of one of the protesters and him harassing people simply on race. And the ironic thing is this guy was white too. He was making it all about race with the people who happened to be there worshiping. So here's a really quick take on that.
White people who are living lavish, comfortable lives while children are dragged into concentration camps. You're living real life, nice lives, absolutely nothing for your Latino and Somali brothers and sisters. You come here to a man wearing a suit as a preacher. Did Jesus wear a suit? Did Jesus profit off the words? No. Jesus would die within it. You do not touch me. Touch me again and see what happens. Hey, you can't. You are a fake Christian. Why are you not standing with your Somali and Latino communities? Why do I not see you out at Whipple every day protesting this attack on humanity? Where are you? You're sinners. You're pretending to be Christians, but we know you live an easy life.
Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of what people were dealing with. That, like I said, nobody was throwing punches as far as we know, but you can see it was pretty. There was a lot of friction.
Yeah, and deliberate, right? Those are it's an attempt to intimidate people into behaving the way you want them to believe. It's like a struggle session. I hate to go back to this, but this is just a way that these people are using to try to implement communism, right? It's how do you implement communism? You destroy the fabric that holds societies together. And how do you do that in the United States? You separate everybody by race.
Yeah.
And because once you separate everybody by race, everybody's separated by race, and now you can use them against each other. That is the whole point.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah.
So,
that's the whole point.
Yeah. Well, speaking of communism, I guess it's kind of a good segue into the next story we wanted to talk about, and that is price caps on credit cards. So we're coming up on the break from public access, but let me see if I can at least whet your appetite for the story before we break away. And let's see here. Here we go. Where is the story? Oh, here it is. Okay. So the let me add the okay. Yeah, there we go. So Trump is looking to put a 10% cap on interest rates on credit cards. And of course, this is kind of like price controls. I mean, certainly this is sort of a populist idea, the idea that, boy, those credit card companies, they're so bad, they make a lot of money, and wouldn't it be nice if they made less money? And I guess I don't know. I think that's the thinking, but it's sort of like limit the interest rates. And I got to say, if you're watching us on public access, that's all the time for you that we have here, but go check us out on knuckleheadsofliberty.com so you can catch the rest of our conversation on this. Some new EPA rules and the discussion that Ro Khanna and Kara Swisher were having. But so go check us out on knuckleheadsofliberty.com. So on with the rest of the show. So we've got a short video that kind of explains to people what it is that's happening. And it sounds like it's a little bit of chaos because this isn't like something that has actually, there's not an actual policy in place here. This is kind of Trump shooting from the hip saying that credit cards are going to be limited to 10%, and everybody seems to be a little bit confused. So let me bring in the video here.
We're putting a 1-year cap at 10%, and that's it. They know it. They've really abused the public. The credit card companies have totally abused. I'm not going to let it happen.
The president posted a couple more details on Truth Social. The cap would last for 1 year, and he'd like it to start on January 20th. But there's still a lot of questions, including if he needs Congress to make it happen. Prominent Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren said she would work with Trump to get the cap passed. And Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders actually filed a bill last fall to cap credit card interest rates, but it never came up for a vote.
Well, if Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are for caps on credit cards, I'm sure it must be a good idea. Let's see what some of the numbers are that they think might be the benefit of doing this.
If rates were at 10%, a cardholder with a $5,000 balance would pay about $42 per month in interest. At the current average rate of 24%, they owe about $100 a month. The idea is that by paying less in interest, you can pay down more of your debt.
But of course, we're talking about a form of price controls here, which makes me wonder, could this backfire?
So this could really backfire.
Ted Rossman from Bankrate says banking insiders believe they'd have to cut back on who could get a credit card. In fact, there's an industry study that suggests only 1 out of 10 people would actually qualify for a new credit card if rates were capped at 10%.
That's because credit cards are unsecured debt. They're not backed by a car or a home or any tangible asset. Banks' big worry is people might not pay them back. And I know a lot of people think that credit card rates are too high, but the 10% cap is just so low that it would not be workable for them.
It sounds like this might drive people toward worse alternatives.
He worries people might have to use worse alternatives than
for a car repair or groceries and you don't have cash on hand. If your credit card goes away, do you turn to a payday loan with a 400% APR?
So it sounds like there could be some unintended consequences. And finally, let's see where this currently stands.
There is no law limiting rates, and banks say they need more guidance about the plan. Banks and their stocks did take a hit in the market today. And even though today is the deadline, millions of credit holders haven't seen any change.
And when they said today, I think they were talking about January 20th, I think. So there you go, on Martin Luther King Day.
Yesterday I was recording this, right? Yeah. And nothing has yet happened. It's because you can't just change these things despite his desire to. You can't simply tell companies what their percentage rates are. But it's people seem to forget that when you're buying into the credit system, it costs money because it is actually a credit system, right? And it costs you money to buy into that system. You know, when I spent 20 some odd years without a bank account, with literally zero credit because I didn't borrow any money. And so eventually when I went to buy a car, I had to pay a stupidly outrageous, interest rate on it. But it is what it is because there was no track record for a bank to give me a loan. And I was a gig worker. So at the same time, so there was no steady paycheck. So the bank had to take a risk. And so the people who pay off their loans, like me, have to pay for the people who don't. And, some of us understand that and some of us don't, I suppose, is the.
Yeah. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand as part of a transaction is that there is a cost to risk. And like you said, the idea that somebody might not get their money back, that is a risk of not consuming today and loaning that money out so that somebody else can consume. You're risking that you may not get to consume tomorrow. So these are all things that need to be priced into the market. And ultimately what protects us is the competition, right? Because if somebody is overcharging, well, if you've got 10 competitors, then you got to figure somebody is going to take advantage of that and slide in with a slightly lower price so that, they can get your business. I mean, that's literally the way markets work. So,
and now that I have credit, I can get credit cards and loans at a much, much lower interest rate than I could before because I have a proven track record. Right. Yeah. And so it costs money to prove that you are able to pay back. You are a responsible adult. It just does. We don't have to like it. You don't have to like the credit card companies, but you start manipulating that system. You now have a manipulated system. And we all know manipulated systems do not work properly.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, it brings us back to the Thomas Sowell quote. That's one of the reasons why I chose this one, is because, look, if you try to artificially cap the price, the market signal of that risk, then you're going to wind up getting potentially inferior products. And that's what the news story was showing. It's that, okay, some people now are not going to have access to the credit card that they might have had access to. And now suddenly they're stuck at a payday loan place. And so now what are we going to do? We're going to help people out by taking that choice away too. I mean,
the payday loan, or if your car needs repair, now there's car places that you can get a loan at the car place, but now your car's under hock. Yeah. Right. And so if you need a repair, you can get the financing. You can get repair financing at a lot of auto repair shops nowadays. But now your car is under hock because your car is your asset. So
yeah. Well, this is one of those things where I did want to dive just a little bit deeper into the general concept of price caps for people, just because this idea of it never seems to go away in politics. I mean, you can see Mamdani is trying to push rent controls in New York. We always seem to have rent controls on the ballot here in California that are, always eroding away at private property rights. And, we just see this kind of stuff happening all the time. And this isn't a new phenomenon. We can go back to Richard Nixon, believe it or not, another Republican president who thought price controls would be popular. And I have a really short video on that, but hopefully this will cement people in the economic concepts of why this is a really bad idea. And, this isn't like just opinion. This is economics, that price controls are bad. So let me pull up this short video.
I am today ordering a freeze on all prices and wages throughout the United States.
In August of 1971, in an attempt to control inflation, President Richard Nixon simply declared that price increases were now illegal.
So what was the immediate fallout of Richard Nixon declaring price controls?
The voters liked the president's war on prices. Nixon was reelected in a landslide. The economy did less well.
Right away, the economy went out of whack. People couldn't cover their costs. Ranchers stopped sending cattle to market. Farmers started drowning their chickens. Instead of controlling inflation, they were creating shortages.
So what you see here is the madness of what happens when central planners have the hubris to think that they can control prices. Prices literally are signals throughout the economy that tell us about relative needs, the supply and demand of different factors of production. And if you don't have those signals, everything starts to break down. And that's kind of what we're seeing in the absurdity of a farmer throwing away his little chicklets because it would cost him more to raise them under the system of price controls than it was worth. Essentially, he would lose money. Let's watch an example from Marginal Revolution University, an online site where you can actually go and take an entire economics course. It's just a wonderful resource, and I highly encourage you to do that. This is a snippet from one of their videos on price ceilings, and I think it's an excellent demonstration of what happens when you interfere with price signals through price ceilings and what that does to supply and demand.
Soon after Nixon's declaration, the situation in many markets started to look like this. The market equilibrium price was above the current price, but it was illegal to raise prices. Prices were hitting the ceiling, the maximum price allowed by law. With a price ceiling, buyers are unable to signal their increased demand by bidding prices up, and suppliers in turn have no incentive to increase the quantity supplied because they can't raise the price. The result is a shortage. The quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied.
And of course, this is what led to the long gas lines of the 70s that people who lived back then remember. Hopefully, we don't have to relive that lesson.
For example, in the 1970s, price ceilings on gasoline meant that it was common to have no gas at the gas station. However, the story doesn't end there. More people want to buy gasoline than there was gasoline available. So who gets the gasoline? Rather than compete for gasoline by bidding up the price, buyers now competed by waiting in longer and longer lines, in effect, bidding up their time. In the 70s, people would wait for hours at the gas station to fill up. So while the monetary price of gasoline doesn't rise, the price paid in people's time did increase. Moreover, when buyers pay for gasoline with money, the seller gets the money. When buyers pay for gasoline in time, the seller doesn't get the time just gets wasted.
And by the way, too, that when he said that the price doesn't change, it's not even exactly true, because if you happen to wait in line and you got more gas than you needed, you're probably going to take a higher price from somebody who just comes by and offers you money so that they don't have to wait in line. And that's what scalping tickets is all about, right?
Yeah, it's the same concept, right? If people will steal the gas and then go sell it. We're having that problem nowadays where people are drilling holes in gas tanks and then taking the gas and go. And so nothing is new under the sun, right? This desire, I understand the desire, right? You can understand the desire, but it quite literally has never worked. And so why do we think it's going to this time? And so it's the point is, in that little Richard Nixon clip, oh yeah, it's very popular for short-term, gains until 2 years later when the economy still tanked and now it's not so popular, but yet they're not going to make that connection. As we see it in New York, we see it in San Francisco. Somehow they don't make the connection that rent control and unaffordable housing is connected. They just refuse to make that connection.
And it's funny too, because what really saved us from the spiraling inflation of those days was, a lot of people credit Fed Chair Paul Volcker when he came in, I think right around the end of the Carter administration, and Reagan kept him on. I believe that's the scenario of how he got there. But he realized that, hey, look, you've got to raise the cost of lending money. You can't just artificially keep this price low, which is unfortunate. That's kind of what we're seeing today, right? I mean, our current president wants to keep it artificially low. And President Reagan, to his effect, backed Paul Volcker to raise interest rates at the Fed, and that caused finally the run on money to essentially slow down. And that's what a lot of people credit the end of that whole inflationary spiral that we were in the 70s. And that was relatively tame, because we're talking double-digit inflation in a year, not the rates that are happening in other places in the world where this really gets out of control. And we're talking triple-digit, maybe quadruple-digit inflation in a year. So so anyways, it's just something to, if we don't learn the lessons of history, and sadly we never seem to, we're doomed to repeat them. That's part of the reason why I wanted to show some of this on the show today.
Well, the problem is, Jason, some of us learn the lessons of history. It's just, the problem is not enough of us learn the lessons of history, or we learn the wrong lessons, right? There's so much history where people learn the wrong lessons of history. They'll look at FDR and see what FDR did. He rescued the people. He rescued the country from the Great Depression. Well, economically, he extended it. I suppose you can give him credit for giving a morale boost to the country to kind of get through the worst of it. I suppose you can give him credit for that, but economically, it did nothing at best, right? At best, it did nothing. And so, yeah, it's economic illiteracy, Jason. We are still fighting that to this day.
And a lot of times economic illiteracy and populism go hand in hand.
Well, yeah, because you're just telling what's popular, right? That's the whole definition of populism. It's whatever happens to be popular. It's what's going on these days. That's what populism by definition is. There is no ideology to populism. It's whichever way the wind is blowing.
Now, we ultimately we have a warped idea of what money is, and the idea that government should be in control of it, and that's why the heart of all of our problems. But that's a deep dive for another day. But I did want to get into another thing that's happening at the federal level. One of the things that usually is good for an economy is getting rid of regulations, but they're doing something a little bit weird over at the EPA, where they're certainly getting rid of some regulations, but they recently just announced a strategy where let's see here, let me pull up the story, where the EPA is saying that it's going to stop. Oh, sorry, let's see, it's not coming up. There we go.
I got you.
Okay, yeah, the EPA says it's going to stop calculating health savings from air pollution rules, right? And this starts to beg the question, well, if you're not going to calculate in the benefits, how do you decide? So let me give you a little bit of a background. We have a short video here that will kind of bring everybody up to speed on this.
In your breakdown, how much is a healthy community worth? The Environmental Protection Agency will stop putting a dollar amount on healthcare costs saved by reducing the presence of two deadly pollutants. We're talking about the rules for fine particulate matter, or PM 2.5, and ozone. Now, until now, the EPA has calculated the estimated costs of reduced asthma attacks, avoided hospital visits, fewer days of work missed, or fewer premature deaths in crafting the rules for the plants, refineries, and mills that release these pollutants.
So what she's talking about there is the impacts of air pollution and the benefits of mitigating some of that pollution. Let's hear a little bit more about an example that she's going to give about how these calculations are made.
For example, according to the New York Times, which was the first to report this change, under the Biden administration, it was calculated that for every dollar spent on reducing PM 2.5, there could be up to $77 in health benefits for the community. Now, the Trump administration plans to only include the cost to the industry. Critics are adamant that removing human health from the equation opens the door for more harm to people who live around industrial facilities. In a statement to the Associated Press, the EPA said it, quote, absolutely remains committed to our core mission of protecting human health and the environment, but, quote, will not be monetizing the impacts at this time.
So I'm all for reducing unnecessary regulations. I mean, this is one of the problems. We're massively overregulated in this country. But if you think there's any reason for any of these regulations, then there has to be a way to compare the costs and the benefits. And if you simply say you can only look at the costs and you have no metric for the benefits, how can you even weigh whether or not it's worth doing the regulation in the first place. And this is one of those things where I think the Trump administration might be better served by maybe looking at the assumptions that are in these calculations that are already there and maybe tweaking some of those assumptions rather than simply saying we're just not going to count the benefits, because the next administration that comes along is most certainly going to count the benefits, and then anything you think you gained in this administration is just going to be tossed to the next administration.
I just want to point out that you're counting asserted benefits, Jason, not actual benefits. Just because they say that it's a $1 to $77 ratio doesn't mean it actually is a $1 to $77 ratio. And so
sure.
I don't trust the bureaucrats at the EPA enough for them to come up with that calculation, quite frankly, because it's almost impossible what they're actually trying to calculate, if not impossible, really. It's just the calculation they're trying. It's a guesstimate at best, which is fine, I get it. But say that.
Yeah. Well, and I get it from the fine minds who brought you the science of COVID, right? I mean, but it does beg the question, though, that, ultimately, I think the real issue here is if we are ever going to have any regulations on this stuff, which, I certainly know there's a lot of libertarians who might be happy to have no regulations at all. But if we're going to have any, there's got to be some way of measuring costs and benefits to some degree. And like I said, in that sense, I think that's where the real tough work is, I think, for conservatives, is to get in there and question these assumptions, right? To get in there and say, okay, well, how do you know this? How do you know that? And maybe, look at and see if, as we saw with COVID, maybe the science of COVID actually silenced a lot of scientists who were saying other things, right? And so, I mean, but ultimately, I do have a really short video that I'm going to show just to kind of give you the sense that there is a cost to some of these areas like the environment, where for libertarians, mostly the issue is we want to bring everything to private property rights. But the problem is there's some things that we really have a tough time bringing down to private property, like things like the air that we can't just easily put a fence around. Maybe if we all had
you're not allowed to pollute your neighbor's yard, right? And now, can you burn is having a campfire that goes over into your neighbor's yard, is that polluting the yard versus, actual, burning plastic that the smoke goes over into the yard, right? Those are similar but different. And we somehow know that as instinctively as human beings, but how do you regulate that? That's the open question, right?
And these things change over time too, because one of the issues is, if you imagine there's one person up in the mountains camping and he has a fire going, well, that effect is negligible. But now if you imagine 100,000 people are up camping and they all have a fire going, suddenly you're going to start to see some effects from that. So,
but everybody has to stay warm, right? If that's the only way to stay warm, then everybody's going to have a fire going, because you're not going to have people freeze.
Sure.
So
I guess the issue, though, is that you can clearly see the impact, though. I mean, whereas before you might not have even seen an impact because it seemed just, there was.
Anybody who's camped up at Tahoe Valley can see when the inversion layer stuck and all the campers have their fires going. You can see the fire smoke is down here at 6 feet. It happens. Everybody's seen it, but I don't think anybody would argue that that's polluting your next door neighbor. It's inconvenient, it's an annoying, and you avoid it if you can. But I don't think anybody's calling that pollution.
So I did want to show an example, though, of how it gets bad. I mean, we've had issues before in Los Angeles. There's been issues in other parts of the world. Here's a quick video that kind of shows what's going on this last year in India. So I think this will kind of show you a sense of how bad, I guess, things can get, and why maybe there needs to occasionally be some comparisons of costs and benefits here. So here we go.
From October onwards, a thick haze containing dangerous microparticles smothers the city. Delhi's air pollution problem stems from vehicle emissions, smoke from agricultural fires, and dust from construction. It's exacerbated by the city's topography and a lack of wind in winter. Over the past 2 weeks, the pollution has reached hazardous levels multiple times, according to the Air Quality Index. It's recommended that Delhi's more than 30 million residents wear masks, do not exercise outdoors, keep windows closed at home, and run air purifiers.
So what are some of the effects of this pollution?
So the short-term effects are not what I'm worried about, which are seasonal coughs and asthma. What I'm more concerned about are the long-term effects, which are irreversible. There is irreversible health harm that pollution causes. This is India's silent pandemic, in a way, pandemic in slow motion, because a lot of non-communicable diseases are triggered by this very dangerous level of air pollution, things like strokes and heart attacks and COPD, diabetes. I mean, you name it, and air pollution triggers it, because these tiny particles go into every organ of the human body, because they're able to bypass the body's natural defenses, and they get into our lungs and through that into our bloodstream, and therefore travel to every organ. So the health harm is huge.
And that huge is not a very quantifiable term, and that's where I think Republicans would be well served in trying to quantify huge.
Well, and here's the problem: is this we take this and we interpret this from essentially a utopian perspective, right? Where there's nobody ever has any health problems, there's never ever any pollution, and that is kind of the standard we hold it against, rather than, hey, when I walked to school in elementary and junior high school, I could see the pollution in my town, and now I can't, despite the fact that we're 3-4 times bigger. So we have done a lot. Rather than acknowledging we have done a lot, we are living a lot cleaner. We are sitting here pretending that we've done nothing and that we're still living in, here, we're still living in air that looks like that in India. On occasion, we get some weird, goofy inversion layer and pollution becomes a problem for a few days or a week or something, but it's not really a long-term problem. And while I would love to be able to quantify the dangers, there is a problem with that, is when you qualify every little danger, now you have to solve every little danger. And at a point, does the cost actually create the benefit? Is me living 6 months longer, theoretically living 6 months longer, worth all the costs of the regulations and whatnot? I would say no, because I'm not someone who's interested in living as many days as possible. I'm just want to live my life until it's done. And so if I live to 80, it's 80. If it's 70, it's 70. I'm not particularly cared about that. So again, there's a goofy line there somewhere, Jason, and I'm not exactly sure where it is, right?
That was one of the funny things, because we showed a video about back in December on the show, and it was of Milton Friedman talking about this topic. And I find this little piece of treasure, because it's really hard to find libertarian talking about this particular topic with respect to saying anything other than get rid of the regulations. But Milton Friedman's point was that that as far as regulation goes, there's a cost to the regulation too. There's a pollution cost to the regulation, and so the issue is every regulation itself has a smokestack attached to it, and the issue is, does the smokestack of the regulation outweigh the smokestack of what you're trying to fix? And that's kind of the calculation that he was looking at. So
yeah, everything's a trade-off, right? There's nothing comes without a cost. And so you have to determine what the cost is and which trade-off you're willing to deal with. Are you willing to deal with extra asthma, or are you willing to deal with, electricity costs for your house doubling? Which cost do you want to put up with? Those are the kind of questions we have to ask. And the problem is we don't ask them.
Yeah.
Right. We just say, oh, well, this is cleaner, this is dirtier, so let's do this. Well, okay, but that's fine. But we should really think it all the way through, because how many times have we come 10 years later, oops, that was a mistake. Like recycling, all this recycling we do. And it turns out that, all the cardboard recycling, we used to gather it all together, stick it on a boat, send it to China for them to do who knows what with it. And I'm going, well, it would have been less environmentally damaging to just put it in our landfills. And so you're going, we screwed this all up.
Well, not only that, but I mean, some of this was just a scam. I mean, we were literally sending recyclables to China, and then they were just dumping it. So, I mean, it was just like out of sight, out of mind. And, so, I mean, some of this stuff is just for show. And, that's one of the problems here too, is that I think words like recycling have become a religion for some people. And one of the real tests on recycling is, if something is not, if it costs more to recycle something than it does to just make a new one, that's pretty much a sign that that's garbage. It's not should be recycling, because the issue is that, you know, you're using resources and creating pollution to recycle. It's not free, right?
Recycling isn't pollution free. It is not. And so even something like a glass bottle, which is relatively easy to recycle and relatively pollution free, is still not pollution free. So
yeah, I always used to like thinking, you know, like a plastic fork, you know, it used to be, before all the prices went up recently, that you could get plastic forks in bulk for about 2 cents a piece, you know, if you were buying them, you know, in 1,000 lot at Costco or something. And you think about the time it takes to wash in between the tongs of a fork, and the amount of water and the amount of soap and the amount of time that you're using, when for 2 cents, you could literally just chuck it and have a new one, right? And that plastic, if it goes in a landfill, it's not going anywhere, right? That plastic fork is not winding up in some turtle in the middle of the ocean, right?
Right.
So,
That's the other thing. And again, like some place that's not near the ocean can have different regulations. You might want to be more careful with straws and plastic pieces and bags if you're living on an ocean beach town. Okay, great. But if you're living in Boise, you know, the turtles aren't the problem, you know?
And unlike a plastic bag, your plastic fork isn't flying out of the landfill, right? I haven't seen forks flying through the air out into the ocean. So, but I mean, it's just
only if they get stuck to the tire of the dump truck, right? That's the only way they're getting anywhere.
But I mean, some people have been taught that this is such a religion and it's plastic that, oh, that's so terrible. But I mean, if you think about it, you're not wasting the water, you're not wasting the soap, you're not wasting your time in cleaning it. And, you know, I mean, obviously it's nice to have some metal utensils too, but, you know, it's a lot, you know, it's not so clear to me that you're not necessarily wasting more resources just taking that 2 cent plastic fork and tossing it than you are from washing every one of them, you know?
Well, here's the other thing, Jason. Our lives are so much cleaner now than before plastics were invented.
Yeah.
Now, how much of a direct connection that is, I don't know, but our lives are much more cleaner and much more sanitary now that petrochemicals have been used widely. So take that for what it is, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think hopefully that gives people a little bit of a sense that maybe this stuff is not quite as cut and dry as some would have you believe it all is. And, you know, it does bring up too one last thing. You know, there's a guy named Bjorn Lomborg, and he's always looked at the climate change thing from the economist side of things. And one of the things he says is, look, you know, I mean, a lot of this stuff, it's all about trade-offs, right? And, you know, you can, you know, whether you believe that climate change is happening or not, you know, there's some relatively low cost things you can do and some high cost things. Well, if we do a few of the low cost things, you know, okay, that might help the situation. And if you really believe this is happening, then that's a good thing. And over time, technology will get better, and then we can address those harder things later if it's still a problem. Whereas, you know, some of these other people say, no, do all the hard things today, no matter what it costs. Right. And I mean, that's just nuts, right? I mean, that's kind of religiosity talking. And by the way, Andrea Ocasio-Cortez said 12 years ago that game over after, or it was 12, or she said after 12 years, game over. I think that was about 10 years ago. So,
yeah. Well, the game over date has passed so many times.
Yeah.
And when I study the climate, I don't study what I always look for what they're omitting in their things. Like it was only a few years ago where they started adding solar variation to their calculations, but they still haven't added the fact that our magnetic field is changing, as weakening and shifting, and what the impacts of that would be to the climate. I don't know what they would be, but I do know there's going to be some. Yeah. And you know, it could be counterintuitive. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, well, of course the planet's warming up because our magnetic field is decreasing. I don't know. Maybe it's counterintuitive, but I do know they're not counting it. And so if they're not counting something as obvious as that, an input that's as obvious as that, then their data is not trustworthy.
Well, and I do know one other thing too, that COVID taught us all that when an authority says the science is settled, No, the science is never settled. You always need to have open discussion on these things. There's no shortcut around free speech on these issues, and hopefully we will continue to have rich debate on these topics.
Yeah, the history of science is that science is never settled, right? That's just the history of science. We're never done, right?
Yeah.
You never actually know what's going on, because the more we learn, the more we know, the less we know, right? That's kind of that's the way that works. The more we learn, the less we know. So
yeah. Sadly, there's so many things. Doesn't matter whether they learn more or less. We still find out how little they know, and that's goes to the politicians who are pushing the wealth tax in California. And so that brings us to our Knucklehead Noise Patrol here, where Ro Khanna was. Let's see if I can get that up there. Ro Khanna was recently in a discussion with a woman named Kara Swisher, who's a sort of a left-leaning journalist, and they were talking about this billionaire tax we were just talking about on the last show, me and Leon, and the idea that this billionaire tax has already had the negative impact of driving out. It's almost $1 trillion in billionaires. I think it's already been
$1 trillion
out
of wealth has left the state in December, essentially just in December.
Yeah. And this is a fairly rational thing, right? I mean, we already tax people on their income. And for a case of a lot of these guys, it's capital.
Yeah. And
so okay, yes, I think a little interruption there, but it's usually capital gains that they're being taxed. And these guys, are already paying a huge amount of taxes. And so California, though, is spent more than it takes in as a regular course. And so they said, well, how can we get more money? Well, that's okay. We'll just go after the richies again. And this time it was the unions, I think, that were really pushing this. And they wound up
the healthcare union. Let's be clear, it's a healthcare union doing it.
Yeah. And so they're killing the goose that laid the golden egg. I mean, because essentially these guys pay a huge amount of the taxes in the state, and they're leaving. So that means they won't be here to pay those taxes.
That's the thing. They already pay more than their fair share, right? They already pay an outlandish share of taxes. The wealthy already pay an outlandish share of taxes, not just in California, but around the country. Right? It's like the top 2% pay half the taxes or something goofy like that. In the United States, it's income tax. It's something really goofy. And California has a highly progressive tax rate. It's insanely progressive. It's one of the most progressive tax systems in the world. But yet it's not enough. You ever notice? It's never, ever enough. And one of the things people are talking about is this is a direct threat to property rights, because once they could, remember, they're taxing your property. So now you have to sell it before you can pay it, because they're not taxing cash. They're taxing theoretical value. And so now you have to sell this property in order to pay taxes on it. This confiscation. It's another loop in the you will know nothing, right? You'll own nothing and like it. You will own nothing and like it. This is another step in that, and they're just pretending it's not.
Well, and I feel like, before we get into the video, but this brings us back to our quote of the day again, which is, Thomas Sowell, and how he sort of relates these economic laws to gravity, essentially, this quote came from an article that he wrote on price controls. And I like the way he kind of describes the intro here. He says, I first became aware of the law of gravity as a small child when I pedaled my tricycle off the porch and crashed into the yard. Gravity was, of course, operating all the time, whether I was aware of it or not. Economics is a lot like that. And many people who are completely unaware of economics, and he goes on to say, they're going to run into the same thing, essentially. And that's what this Kara Swisher woman is experiencing now. She's experiencing the fact that gravity has taken over. They had this great idea of putting a wealth tax on people, and they can't believe that it's not working. So let's watch the video and just have some fun with their reaction here.
That billionaires, in my view, can pay more so that people have health care, childcare in this country. I call it an anti-revolution tax. I call it a sense of shared prosperity.
So that was Ro Khanna expressing his support for a wealth tax while on a podcast with left-wing journalist Kara Swisher. And a wealth tax is essentially not taxing somebody's income, but literally saying, how much have you got? And we're going to take some portion of that. And of course, the amount that they're talking about is 5%, I believe, over 5 years is what the proposal from the unions is in California. Now, this hasn't gone into effect yet, as we talked about last week, but it's something that is going to be proposed on the ballot, and it is something that is retroactive, as we discussed last week, and therefore billionaires have been fleeing the state to the tune of approximately $1 trillion worth of billionaires has already left the state. Let's hear what Kara Swisher has to say about this if you really want to hear what a lot of left-wing people think about the billionaires who are fleeing the state.
I have of two minds of this. One is you made and I said it to one this weekend. I said, you made all your money in California, you ungrateful piece of shit. You could figure out a way to pay more taxes, and we deserve the taxes from you, given you made your wealth here. The second thing is, yes, there are different ways to do this, but the length of time it would take and the kind of vehemence you would fight whatever happens means nothing would happen. So why don't we just do shock and awe at this point? Because you don't seem to be, availing yourself to thinking that you owe your state something more.
Well, don't hold back, Kara. Tell us how you really feel. But this is the issue, right? I mean, essentially, socialists feel like whatever somebody else has, if it's more than what they have, they should have some claim on it. I wonder where they got that idea.
Somebody invested in roads and bridges. If you got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
Yeah, this is insane. So a multinational corporation, a person who started a company that grew into a multinational corporation, she's claiming they made their money all in California, right? It's patently untrue just at the beginning, right? And these businesses can now be run from anywhere. They don't need you. It's just insane that they think you owe them, right? The government coffers come before yours. And that's essentially what she's saying. And it's the rich now, but guess what? It's you tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, and I love the attitude too. It's like, you ungrateful piece of shit is the way they look at billionaires. Right? I mean, yeah. That's just nuts, right? I mean, I've already paying a gobload of taxes, business taxes, personal taxes, income taxes. But it's not enough because somebody decided, right? Not some agreement upon everybody, just some unions decided it's not enough. You have to pay more. And I think you're ungrateful because you're not willing to give me more money. Well, yeah. I want money from her. She has more money than me, so I want her to give me some money. You ungrateful piece of crap for not giving me money. Yeah. Yeah. And the sad reality is it's really the billionaire who should be turning around after being fleeced in their taxes, right? I mean, these people are literally paying hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes to the state. And to sit there and say, we want more. Well, that's the billionaire's the one who should be saying, you ungrateful piece of shit. Right? Yeah.
And no more for what? So you can lose it? So you can let it go in fraud? Like our unemployment fraud, or the homeless fraud, or the high-speed rail fraud, or the Bay Bridge fraud. We all forgotten about the Bay Bridge, project disaster that cost twice as much. We all kind of swept that under the rug. So no, you ungrateful piece of wench. You guys do not know how to prioritize your spending, so nobody should give you a damn dime.
Yeah.
That's my feeling.
And look at it. I mean, the projects, the way they're losing money, over $20 billion lost on homelessness. Homelessness increases, and they can't account for it. A bullet train that is going nowhere fast, and we have no train. It's not running. All we have is some just gargantuan pieces of just relic that indicate to anybody driving down 99 what a disaster the state is when it commandeers project, right?
We can't do anything big because there's too many grifters, and that's the way the system is set up, right? It's pick your state, it's not even pick your state, the feds. It's run this exact same way the Department of Defense is, right? It's all just a grift game.
The Department of War.
Of War, yes. Yeah, Department of War. We're all run the same way. This is so endemic throughout the whole system of We call it fraud, call it abuse, call it just refusal to prioritize. I don't care what it is, but the reality is they suck at spending money.
Yeah. Well, and the sad thing is, I was talking about the numbers last week. It's, this is going to cost on annual, if you lost $1 trillion worth of earners here, this is probably going to cost you in the neighborhood of, 15 to $20 billion a year that you would have had coming into the coffers. It's just absolutely nuts because you were too damn greedy, right?
Yeah. Talk about greed, right? The compounding of that wealth is going to be happening somewhere else now. And so, yeah, we're losing out on all that, and they forget that part. And this was essentially a one-time. They were going to create a long-term spending for a 5-year income, right? It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. And of course, if they've done it once, then they're going to come back to that well over and over again.
It's only for 5 years. Yeah, until year 6, and then you guys do it again.
Yeah,
because it's not going to give as much money as they claim it will, and so they're going to need more money. You can write. We've written the script for this so many times. We've seen it. It's not even a question of what's going to happen. It's just we know what's going to happen, and it's just a matter of time waiting for it to play out.
Well,
hopefully California voters get smart this time. Even Gavin Newsom says this is stupid. So, yeah.
That's maybe he's just reading the tea leaves, I guess. But
I don't think this is the tea leaves. I think even Gavin Newsom knows this is dumb.
Well, the irony too that when somebody like Obama says you didn't build that, and you look at these guys, and these guys literally built a lot of things, right? And they're leaving the state, and then you turn around and look at the state and these hulks of tracks that don't have a train running on them, a project that was supposed to have a bullet train, 5-10 years ago. We got no train, and we're in the whole $20 billion. And you got to look at California and say, you can't build that. It's not even you didn't build that. You just don't even know how, right?
Yeah.
The
incompetence of the state of California is astounding.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah. Well, I tell you that pretty much hits all the topics of our show today. James, do you have any final thoughts before we cut loose here?
No. Hey, the only final thought I have is I am no longer a man of responsibility for the Libertarian Party, so that's a good news for me. But we've got some solid leadership now. So yeah, we got some solid guys.
I forgot to introduce James's title at the beginning of the show, but when I had in the past, he has been the Sacramento County chair of the Libertarian Party. And I guess he's finally passed the torch on that. So
Pat finally found a replacement for me. So someone else gets the condolations. So now I am just host of Libertarian Counterpoint.
Which, by the way, is on Thursday nights on public access. So that's another show that's worth checking out. So if you happen to be watching us on public access, or just search online for Libertarian Counterpoint. And
we actually had a great interview last week with Hannah Hendrickson from respectamerica.org. She came on and we had a hour conversation. So check that out this week and next week.
Oh, awesome.
I guess last week and this week. There you go. Check it out. Check it out last week and next week.
Yeah, some of these shows are pre-taped.
Yeah, I think her first segment interview airs tomorrow as recording. So that's Thursday, the 22nd, and then the second half airs on the 29th. So there we go.
Okay.
And we're recording this on the 21st, just so everybody knows. There we go.
Awesome. Something to look forward to. So, well, anyways, if you're watching us, thanks so much for joining. Until next time, think about what you can do in your community to move the ball for liberty, whether that's becoming a journalist and exposing fraud in your community, or joining the Libertarian Party, or whatever it is that you think you can do, because they're coming for your liberty, and if we don't do something about it, we're going to lose it. So do what you can. Until the next show, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yeah.